It's Brian Preston, the money guy.
With loans being in high interest rate territory, what should I consider when deciding to put more money towards retirement or saving to reduce loans originating in the next few years?
Brian, that sounds a lot to me like a financial order of operations question. Do you have any sort of resources, courses, or anything that might help
Anything.
Seth figure out how to prioritize paying off debt?
I'm going to leave you to share that, but I want to give something that will ground it all first.
Sure.
Kind of a fact, because I think when we get in these inflationary periods, we see interest rates going up. I got the email yesterday, just like you guys did, from Ally that says that they're paying 3% now on their cash. Mm-hmm. We know loans, are 6. Daniel did some research, so car loans are getting around 8%. Mm-hmm. And you're like, man, all this stuff, the world's upside down. No, let me give you some history here to give you perspective, and then Bo can tell you about resources. From 1980 all the way through the end of 2021, if you looked at inflation compared to the rate of return of the S&P 500, the spread between inflation and the S&P 500, like I said, from 1980, there was a lot of inflation. The last time we had high inflation was in that early 80s period. The spread was still 8.9%. Mm-hmm. So that's not average rate of return. The average rate of return was actually higher than that. I'm talking about the spread, because what you're worried about with inflation is that even though you're making 3% on your cash, if inflation's at 8%, you are getting eaten alive on the purchasing power of the long term. So still, investment, even though it's very volatile right now in a bear market, seems like that is not the safe play or even the smart play. But that's true short-term thinking. Long-term wealth building thinking, you're going to want to be invested. And that's where it goes back to Bo with, what do you do with your next dollar?
Yeah, so when it comes to the decision, do I pay off interest-bearing loans or do I build for the future? It's really an opportunity cost question. What's the best use of my dollars? I'll use a really easy example. If you're someone who has a 2.5% mortgage that you locked in a few years ago, every dollar that you pay on that mortgage is going to save you 2.5 cents of interest. If you think about it, instead of paying off that mortgage, if I were to go take that dollar and deploy it into my portfolio, perhaps I could make 7, 8, 9, 10% annualized over the next 40 years. You would argue that the opportunity cost of that dollar is better utilized going into the portfolio than paying off the 2.5% mortgage. So now let's flip it. Let's say that you have a credit card that has a 19% interest rate. I could take $1 and pay off that credit card debt and immediately save 19% interest. Or I could go employ that dollar to go maybe earn somewhere between 7 to 11% annualized. It probably makes more sense to go pay off that high interest debt. That's the reason why we've structured the financial order of operations to make step number 3 high interest debt, which is often associated with credit cards or consumer loans, those types of debt products. Well, then you have to think, okay, well, as rates are rising, as the interest rates on different types of loans are increasing, perhaps it's student loans that are increasing, or perhaps it's auto loans that are increasing. You have to define for yourself in your financial journey, what can $1 do for you? What is the equity risk premium? That's the fancy term. What can I earn above the risk-free rate on the dollars I'm deploying? If I can earn more out there in the marketplace, investing, growing those dollars, then I should lean that way. If I can't earn more, if I've got an 8% car loan, but I'm in a really conservative portfolio that I think is only going to make 6%, then I probably need to prioritize paying off that high interest car loan. So you have to define what is high interest for you and then what is low interest for you. As it relates to the financial order of operations, you can go to moneyguide.com/resources to download our free deliverable. Your high interest debt should be knocked out in step 3. You actually don't start knocking out that low interest debt until you get to step 9. So you have to figure out how to segment those 2 different types of loan payments and figure out for where you are in your financial journey, which one makes the most sense. So as rates are rising, you got to do this analysis on your car loan. You got to do it on your student loan. You got to do it on your fill in the blank loan and make the best decision for your next dollar. That was the optimization strategy. There is another idea that ultimately the purpose of your dollars is to do the things that you want them to do. Money is not a goal. It is a tool to help us achieve our goals. So if your goals are different, if you have the goal of being debt-free and being debt-free is more important to you than optimization, You also have to factor that into your calculus to make sure that you're making really great decisions for you. We lay out the optimization standpoint, but you ultimately have to drive the goal standpoint to figure out what it is you should be doing.
Well, I think it's important to remind everybody it can change. A person in their 20s, where you're going to be very aggressive with your saving and investing because you don't need the money for 20, 30, 40 years in the future, it's okay. I mean, you're going to have a higher threshold because the wealth building opportunity of every dollar you're investing is so high. But for a 50-year-old, you're going to be in a very diversified portfolio. It's good. The expected rates of returns will be much more modest. Your definition of high interest is going to be substantially lower than that 20-year-old. So it's one of those things where there's just factors that go into it. But for a 20-something, you're going to need to still prioritize wealth building, but balancing. You don't want to have the traps, the debt traps like credit cards, consumer debt, and other things like that. But it is going to be, it's funny how or interesting how your life changes or evolves with time, because when you're in your 50s, now all of a sudden you shouldn't have any student loan debts. You might even be looking at that low interest mortgage and be like, well,
don't want it anymore.
I don't need to have that anymore because the spread between what I'm making on my money and versus what I'm paying on the money, it's more about me keeping my wealth versus building wealth at this point. That comes into play.
Love it.